How did you know about that? The stringer that you asked is one of ours. He told me about it. He softly explained to Han Shuo and continued, I will give you this information free of charge. Cage has just left the Empyrean Peak and should be on his way back to his base. If you want to find him, now is the time. Upon finishing those words, the guard smiled at Han Shuo, said nothing more, and returned to the Omphalos. Han Shuo was at a loss for words and couldn't understand why would the fella be so nice to him. But after hearing that Cage had left the Empyrean Peak, Han Shuo immediately changed his plans. He wanted to kill Cage before doing anything else. Father, I don't think that guy gave us Cage's whereabouts for nothing. He might want us to kill Cage and then leak the information to everyone, said Han Hao soon after that Omphalos guard left. Han Shuo put on a faint smile and nodded praisingly. He thought that his firstborn was indeed not as naive as the 5 elite zombies. After thinking about it carefully, he thought that Han Hao's suspicion was very likely. The 5 sovereigns of the Fringe hated each other. That guard probably wasn't working for Salah's. If he were to leak the information after Han Shuo kills Cage, Han Shuo would most likely be hunted by Salah's forces. Based on the strength that Han Shuo displayed, if Salah's gang was to hunt and fight Han Shuo, even if Han Shuo ends up dead, Salah's forces would have to pay a significant price for it. This would be a desirable outcome for them. It's no bother, we will still kill Cage. But when the time comes, be extra careful so that no one would suspect us. We will eventually have a confrontation with the 5 sovereigns, but now isn't the time yet. Han Shuo's ultimate goal was to rule the land of chaos. However, as Han Shuo currently had yet to break through to the Skybreak realm in demonic arts, he had no confidence in fighting the 5 sovereigns. Understood, replied Han Hao noddingly. Then suddenly, Han Hao suggested, Father, how about you leave the matter about Cage to me? You can carry on with your business. Han Shuo stared blankly at Little Skeleton for a moment. He thought about it, bunched his brows, and replied, You should have no trouble finishing Cage in a solo fight. But what if he is traveling with other experts? Then I will bring Little Earth along. With Little Earth, I can mount a sneak attack anytime, anywhere. I will finish Cage in the shortest time possible and then escape with Little Earth. That do it, said Han Hao confidently. Han Hao was infamous in the Death Dominion for his savageness and ruthlessness. Not only that he possessed extraordinary strength, but he was also calm and decisive in his actions. Over the past 5 decades, he rarely ever lost any battle. Han Shuo thought about his words for a moment and nodded smilingly. Han Shuo knew from experience that it was by letting his kids face dangers and challenges by themselves that they would grow at the fastest rate. Besides, Cage had just mid-stage high god strength. From the power that Little Skeleton demonstrated, it shouldn't be too difficult for him to kill Cage. And with Han Tu around, he could attack and retreat without any trouble, and therefore Han Shuo wasn't too worried about his safety. Little Earth, come with me, said Han Hao after turning to Han Tu. Han Tu seemed somewhat excited. He put on his innocent smile and said to Han Shuo, Bye, Dad. If you couldn't find me, look for me at the Omphalos in 1 month, Han Shuo said to Han Hao. Yes, Father, Little Skeleton nodded and left with Han Tu. Let's go, we will look for your friends, said Han Shuo after turning to Rose. Rose said nothing and started leading the party, flying towards the southwest. Han Shuo, Wood Elite Zombie, Water Elite Zombie, Fire Elite Zombie, and Metal Elite Zombie followed behind her. After 3 days, Han Shuo and his party appeared at an everglade covered in a poisonous mist in the southwest of the Fringe. They had been wandering about aimlessly. Air bubbles would float up to the swamps and sludge and linger on the surface for a second before popping, releasing toxic gases into the atmosphere. Plants and animals that live in the region usually possess some kind of toxicity. All along their journey, countless rare and bizarre plants had tried pouncing on Han Shuo and his party without any warning. However, those plants would always be stopped by Han Mu. The fuck, man, the plants in this region are damn stubborn. I have to spend more energy than usual to control these plants. I'm so fortunate to possess the virid leaf. Otherwise, I would have exhausted more than half of my energy just dispersing them, complained Han Mu. He was disgruntled that the plants found in the Everglade would dare question his authority. All plants in the universe survive on the yuan energy of wood, while Wood Elite Zombie was born from it. Therefore, He could use the yuan energy of wood naturally found in his body to control every kind of plant. Although they were made of the same energy, those plants belonged to existences of a much lower level compared to Wood Elite Zombie, as their souls had yet to possess self-awareness. Normally speaking, any living thing that survived on the energy of wood will not be able to resist Wood Elite Zombie's control. When inside a forest, Han Mu could fuse his energy with every tree and plant. He could use them to make attacks or to use their energy of wood to restore the divine energy he exhausted. That was also why Wood Elite Zombie's strength would increase by several folds when he was inside a large forest. Even a high god might not be able to defeat him. The plants living on this Everglade, however, perhaps corroded by the toxins, grew very stubborn and unyielding. They would refuse to simply comply with Han Mu's command, and he must use more energy than usual to control them. Rose, where is your friend living? Han Shuo had been expanding his consciousness, but he did not detect any sign of life. This made him rather puzzled. I don't know the exact location, but he should be around here. He is of a unique race, and of all my friends, he has the strangest temperament and the greatest strength. It's been many years, and I don't know if he is still living in this place, replied Rose. She knew that aimlessly wandering around the Everglade was not effective, but she could not think of a better way to find his friend. Let's just keep looking and hope that we will discover something, remarked Han Shuo. The party continued looking around. They had spent yet another day, but it had been unfruitful. They then arrived at the largest swamp where enormous bubbles floated to its surface. Han Jin's face suddenly jolted. He pointed at the swamp below him and excitedly said to Han Shuo, "Father, there is a very strange metal underneath. I have never seen it before. I'll go check it out." Upon finishing those words, Han Jin leaped to the swamp. But before Han Jin entered the swamp, a monstrous arm that seemed to be made of steel suddenly shot out and grabbed him. It pulled Han Jin into the swamp. Chapter 845, Rock, Paper, Scissors, GDK 845. Rock, paper, scissors, it happened in less than the split of a second. Before Han Shuo could react, Metal Elite Zombie had been pulled to the bottom of the swamp. The giant arm vanished with Han Jin, leaving just a few bubbles on the surface. Han Shuo was alarmed, and he immediately flew towards the swamp. The 17 flying swords whooshed out and shot into the mud. Metal Elite Zombie and Han Shuo had connected minds, and they could sense each other's positions. Following Han Shuo's thoughts, the 17 flying swords shot into the swamp in a flash. An earth-shaking rumble sounded from its depth, while the mud splattered high into the sky. "Show yourself," shouted Han Shuo coldly as he wrecked the swamp with his flying swords. Some of the 17 flying swords were pinching on the humanoid creature covered with mud, and they carried the creature out from the swamp. Several of the flying swords were still bombarding its body, making loud metallic clangs and sparks. Metal Elite Zombie was not on the creature. He re-emerged from the swamp behind the creature and shouted, "What monster?" Toxic sludges overflowed from the humanoid creature's mouth as he spoke in a hoarse voice. "Rose, why are you here?" The sludges slowly fell off his body. Soon, his body that had a metallic sheen was laid bare. Although he bore the form of a human, his flesh and skin seemed to be made of steel and rock. His eyes were glittering with a grayish light that looked inexplicably bizarre. The 17 flying swords that carried intense corrosive power had been making loud metallic noises and sparks when they struck the person. However, he doesn't seem to be vulnerable to the power of the flying swords. Not only that his body wasn't corroding, but he also doesn't seem to be affected by the chilling aura. "Ramen, is that you?" asked Rose. "Yes, I am," replied the strange person. He looked up and down at Han Shuo and his party with grayish eyes and asked, "Why are you here? Who are they?" "They are my friends. We are looking for you," replied Rose. She hesitated for a bit before she asked, "Ramen, how did you turn into this?" "Father, the surface of his body is filled with rare metals and his organs contain all kinds of toxins. He is not afraid of your flying swords," shouted Han Jin after he left the swamp. Golden Cudgel, the supreme treasure of the metal attribute energy, suddenly grew to the size of a large tree and came whacking at Ramen. This alien called Ramen seemed unruffled against Han Shuo's 17 flying swords as though they had been nothing but tickles. But when he saw Metal Elite Zombie's Golden Cudgel, he put on a frightened face. He even forgot to answer Rose and frantically tried to flee from the cudgel. Hee hee, dumbass, your body is filled with metal. How are you gonna run from me? Said Han Jin in a smirk. The golden cudgel then flew off his hand and went after Ramen like a guided missile. No matter where Ramen ran or how he tried to dodge, the golden cudgel would always manage to smack him. It made a loud bang and painful cries which each hit. In just a short few moments, Han Jin's golden cudgel had managed to make 5 good whackings on Ramen's shiny buttocks. The golden cudgel, being an extraordinary weapon of the metal energy, possessed an exceptional power at sensing and manipulating all metals. As most of Ramon's body was made of metals, there was no way that he could run from the golden cudgel's attacks. Paper beats rock, rock beats scissors, and scissors beat paper. This was the situation. As Ramen was made of rare metals and all sorts of toxins, even Han Shuo would have a hard time trying to defeat him. Metal Elite Zombie, however, although less powerful than Han Shuo, could give him a painful beating. Ramen was immune to Han Shuo's deadly 17 flying swords, but he was helpless against Han Jin's golden cudgel. He had tried deploying every kind of defense he knew of, but none of them worked. Asshole, this is for trying to assault me, cursed Han Jin as he whacked Ramen. Hee hee, if it was any other high god, I might not be able to win. But when it comes to you, well, it cannot be easier. After a while, the dizzy-headed Ramen gave up on trying to dodge the golden cudgel. He hastily pleaded to Rose, I didn't know that it's you and your friends. Please stop him. We had fought alongside each other, and I had even helped you escape from Buzz and Bertha. How could you just stand and watch? Please spare him, Rose pleaded while looking at Han Shuo. I owe Ramen a favor. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have managed to escape from the fringe. He has learned his lesson. Can you please ask him to stop? Han Shuo did not travel so far to kill a potential follower. Seeing that Ramen has been amply punished, Han Shuo smilingly said to Han Jin, Oi, you little vengeful brat, isn't that quite more than enough? Han Jin put on a big mischievous smile. He raised an open palm, and the golden cudgel that had been striking Ramen immediately started flying back to him while rapidly shrinking. By the time it landed in his hand, the golden cudgel had turned to the size of a needle. Father, this guy has a very unique body composition that even an average high god won't be able to harm him, but his greatest strength is also his weakness. Unfortunately for him, I'm his kryptonite. I can toy him like a puppet, said Han Jin proudly as though he had accomplished something. After the golden cudgel was kept away, Ramen, who had been seeing stars, gradually recovered. He put on a grimace and said to Rose, It's been quite a while. Is this how you greet your old friends? Although every surface of Ramen's body was made of rare metals, not all of them were as hard as a rock. Some of them were extremely pliable. The metal of Ramen's face was especially so. It was as flexible as normal skin, and it doesn't lessen the rich expressions on his face. You have been hiding under the swamp and immediately attacked us without warning. How would I know that it's you? Replied Rose in an annoyed manner. But shortly after, she put on a puzzled face and asked, Ramen, how did you turn into this? You didn't look like this when we last met. Not just Rose, but Han Shuo was also very curious. They wondered how in the world did that guy turn into this form. It was obvious to them that Ramen was not born with such a body. He must have acquired it through some sort of fortuitous encounter. Han Shuo had been observing the surrounding, and he frequently found skeletons laying around. There must be plenty of gods who died in this region, and if Han Shuo's guess was correct, all of them were killed by Ramen. This indicated that Ramen's strength must be quite extraordinary. Soon after you left, I was ganged up by a group of people and suffered serious injuries. I did all I could to escape from them, and I ran to this place out of desperation. The myriad of toxins all around here started attacking my body, and it was slowly rotting away. At that time, I had lost all hope, so I dived to the bottom of the swamp to bury myself and wait for my death. The metals and toxins underneath the swamp started adhering to my rotten body. I thought that it would just kill me faster. I kept waiting and waiting, but after hundreds of years, not only that I did not die, my body had transformed. That's how I got this shiny new look, explained Ramen. Here, under this swamp. Rose was astounded, and she did not expect Ramen to experience something so miraculous. Ramen nodded and continued, Yes, right under here. I don't even know what I have become. It's not just my body, but even my divine soul has transformed. There are even times that I felt as though I'm a rock, like I have been dead for eons. Raman has a hazy look in his eyes. He seemed vacant and detached, as though he was there, but his mind was not present. I have noticed a lot of skeletons lying around the swamp. Were they killed by you? Asked Hanshu smilingly. Yes. Many years ago, I killed a group of people who entered this place. One of them escaped, and he started spreading lies, saying that there is a treasure inside my body. Since then, I've been hunted by a constant stream of greedy and foolish fringe dwellers. I would have been gutted if it wasn't for the transformation that happened to me. For all these years, I would spontaneously attack and kill everyone who stepped inside my swamp to scare those fringe dwellers away. I attacked you because I thought that you were one of them, explained Raman. Hanshu nodded at Rose smilingly and said, Good, very good. To have killed so many fringe dwellers, he must be quite capable. All right, tell him what I'm here for. Following Hanshu's command, Rose turned to Raman and said, Raman, my master would like to recruit you. Buzz and Bertha have been killed. You wouldn't want to live under a swamp forever, do you? What? Buzz and Bertha killed? Raman was astounded. He looked at Hanshu doubtfully and asked, You killed them? Yep, you could say so. Hanshu put on a smile and said to Raman, I doubt that it had been fun living under a swamp. Besides, you will slowly lose yourself if you keep living here. So join me, I will enhance your body and make you stronger. Raman's body was a wonderful material that could be refined. If Hanshu puts his mind onto it, he could rebuild Raman's body and raise his power. You can run from others, but not from me. If you don't agree to it, I will whack you to death, said Han Jin in a mischievous and evil smirk. The golden cudgel was yet again visible in his hand, and he brandished it threateningly at Raman. Persuaded by Rose, enticed by Hanshu, and threatened by Han Jin, Raman put on a bitter smile while scratching his head. He soon realized that he did not have much of a choice. After a moment of hesitation, he helplessly, yet feeling somewhat thrilled, nodded. Chapter 846 It's hot. GDK 846 It's hot. Hanshu was instructing his children to pour all kinds of materials into the swamp that Raman's body was submerged in. With only his head above the swamp, in an anxious and suspicious face, Raman asked, What exactly are you going to do? That, you shall find out soon enough. You have nothing to worry about. It will only be good for you, no side effects whatsoever, replied Hanshu smilingly. He asked Han Jin to toss more of the colorful stones into the swamp. The Everglade contained certain rare minerals that Metal Elite Zombie could locate and collect with minimal effort. In addition, Hanshu and Han Jin had a large number of miraculous ores stored in their space rings. Hanshu had more than enough materials to rebuild Raman's body. Master, will this work? Rose seemed somewhat uneasy. She had seen Hanshu refine a weapon and knew that he was a master at it. However, Rose did not know that Hanshu could also refine the body of a living being. Therefore, she was worried that the procedure might injure or even kill Raman, who had previously helped her out of danger. Although such a procedure was unimaginable to Rose, Hanshu had been doing it for quite a while. Little Skeleton, the 5 elite zombies, and Gilbert were rebuilt or enhanced by Hanshu in similar manners. Hanshu was very experienced in doing the procedure, and he wasn't at all worried about Raman's safety. The process will be somewhat painful, but I'm sure that he will be very happy with the results. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing, answered Hanshu smilingly. Rose knew that Hanshu was a man of his words and was relieved to hear Hanshu's reassurance. She then shouted at Raman in the distance, Raman, you don't need to worry. It can be a little painful, but rest assured that you will be just fine. After hearing Rose's words, not only that Raman did not get less anxious, he became much more nervous. He pleaded to Hanshu as though he was going to cry, Can I not do this? I'm already quite happy with the current state of my body. Hanshu shook his head, put on a rather wicked smile, and replied, It's pretty good now, but I will make it much, much better. You just need to stay where you are. It will take 1 month at most. I assure you, your new body will work with the metal and toxins much better, and you will sense it yourself. Little gold, throw in those rare metals. Little wood, pour in those poisonous materials you have collected, instructed Hanshu smilingly. Yes, father, replied the energetic Han Mu. He carried an enormous wooden bucket to the air, flew over the swamp, and emptied the stinking, jet-black fluid it contained into the swamp. When Han Shui saw that the metals and poisons were added, he immediately gathered the water element energy and injected them into the swamp. The energy of water brought the swamp to stir at high speed, distributing the materials contained evenly. When everything was ready, Han Huo got into action. Clouds of flames flew out from his fire lotus and into the swamp. All the water in the swamp, including those injected by Han Shui, was turned into steam. When the sludges dried up, they formed an enormous hard mold around Ramen, wrapping him tightly. The 17 flying swords flew out following Han Shu's thought and helped him deploy a miniature soul-gathering formation. To proceed, Han Shuo started injecting his demonic yuan into the swamp. As though someone had turned up the dial on a gas stove, the flames produced by Han Huo suddenly became 1,000 times stronger. The fire erupted and began blasting the swamp with scorching heat. The surge of high heat caused Rose and Han Shui to take a few steps backward. "Ah, it's hot. Ah, help!" cried Ramen as he felt fire consuming his body. Although the metal on his body made him immune to sword attacks, as with every metal, it was very conductive of heat. The metals took no time at all to pass all the heat to the nerve endings on Ramen's body. "This is just the beginning. Can't you endure this bit of pain?" Han Shuo put on a mischievous, evil smile and said, "My kids can easily take this level of pain. If they can do it, so can you. Ramen, you need to have perseverance. Ignore everything happening to your body and hold to your divine soul. Only then can you make the most out of this." Ramen felt as though all of his organs were burning and flames were licking the inside of his chest. He continued to loudly cry in pain and struggled, trying to free himself from the burning mold. Han Shuo let out a long sigh. He turned to Han Jin and gave him a slow nod. Han Jin put on a big, mischievous smirk in response. "I dong." / the golden cudgel came out of nowhere and pounded Ramen's head, sending him half-conscious. He temporarily lost the energy to break free from the mold. Rose, who had been watching nearby, was shocked. She was afraid that the massive and heavy golden cudgel might kill Ramen just like that. She started having doubts as she could not understand why Han Shuo would treat Ramen so cruelly. More often than not, rapidly increasing one's strength requires one to endure extreme pain. Han Shuo knew just what was on Rose's head, and he smilingly said, "Ramen will be just fine. And after he completes the process, he will be thankful that I did this to him." Rose did not know what to say to Han Shuo, and so she did not reply. For the next 7 days, Han Huo continued to bake the swamp using his fire lotus, while Han Jin would throw in certain ores from time to time. During that week, Ramen felt as though he was in hell and was being tortured by the devil. He was under a constant, unbearable, burning pain. Whenever he tried to break free from the mold or about to pass out from the pain, Han Jin's golden cudgel would descend from the sky and land on his head so that he would not be free from the inhuman pain, even for a moment. On the 10th day, Ramen, who felt as though he had been dead many times, suddenly discovered that strands of bizarre energies were flowing into his divine body from the swamp. Those energies had some sort of bizarre connection with his body, and they greatly alleviated his pain. Another bizarre transformation started happening. Ramen noticed that there were more and more metals contained in his body, and they were reassembling based on some sort of miraculous rhythm. The strands of toxins also started flowing around his body, making a just as miraculous transformation to his organs. Ramen, who had been constantly making all sorts of noises, suddenly turned quiet. He started accepting the burning pain and no longer tried to break free from the swamp. Half a month went by in the blink of an eye. Ramen and the mold that covered his body were glowing like a red-hot iron. He had not made a sound and was as still as a boulder. "Has he been cooked to death?" asked Rose, who was wearing a distressed expression. It seemed to her that Ramen had met his demise. "Nah, everything is happening as planned. He is currently in the most optimal state. It won't be long before he reemerges," consoled Han Shuo. Rose was a little skeptical, but hoped Han Shuo's words were true. She watched Ramen attentively for any sign of life. Yet another 3 days had passed. Fire Elite Zombie stopped cooking Ramen with his flames. The sludge that covered his body had turned into a bizarre metal with incredible toughness. From a distance, Ramen looked like a small volcano radiating light and heat. It's almost done. He should emerge tonight, remarked Han Shu after he carefully sensed the state of Raman's divine soul. I hope you are right, said Rose. Her face was filled with regret, as though she felt that it was a mistake to bring Han Shuo to Raman. If Brian really killed Raman, what should I do? How am I going to face him? I thought Rose before she sighed. And soon, the bright full moon took the place of the scorching sun. It was night time. Thick vapor suddenly began emerging from Raman's body as though he was being doused with iced water. His temperature was also rapidly dropping, as though he had been dipped into an ice bath. After a while, Raman stopped giving off vapor and was no longer glowing red. He looked normal again. Under the attentive gazes of the crowd, Raman suddenly opened his eyes and made an ecstatic face. He wiggled slightly, and his body oozed out from the mold as though it was liquid metal. Standing on the swamp, Raman stretched his arms forward, and they transformed into a pair of stabbing blades. Smaller blades glistening with chilling lights also shot out from his shoulders and elbows. He then opened his mouth and spat out a stream of colorless but foul-smelling gas. The plants that touched it immediately withered and liquefied. Raman was laughing heartily, for he realized that he was in absolute control of the metals inside his body. Not only could he transform arms and legs into weapons of any shapes, but he could even instantly transform his body into an enormous sword that spits poisons. Rose was flabbergasted, and she cried out in surprise, "How did you do that? That is miraculous." "So, I guess now you won't blame me for torturing him, will you?" said Han Shu mockingly. "Fella, you should know just how damn lucky you are. Other than my father, who could unleash the full potential of your body, and even do so in such a short time. With your new body, there are now far fewer people who could injure you. Even an average high god wouldn't be able to cause you any harm," remarked Han Jin. While inside the mold, inspired by the transformation, Raman had been thinking about how to use the metals to enhance his body's defensive powers. He had been discussing with Han Shuo and Han Jin about those methods. Han Jin had even given Raman some of his insights about metals. Raman stepped forward, kneeled with both knees, kowtowed at Han Shuo, and said with utmost sincerity, "Thank you, my master." Chapter 847, He's Mine GDK 847. He's Mine. While Han Shuo was rebuilding Raman's body, Han Hao and Han Tu managed to locate Cage. They were around 500 miles south from the Empyrean Peak. Cage and his gang had just robbed a merchant caravan, and they were counting their spoils. They would howl with laughter from time to time. Han Hao and Han Tu were underground and right under Cage. Through the tiny vibrations that travel into the ground, Han Tu could determine the precise locations of people on the surface. He could even guesstimate their number and strength. "Brother, other than Cage, there are 4 high gods and 16 mid-gods. They are closely gathered. Are we going to attack them soon?" asked Han Tu. Han Hao's purple demon eye glistened on his calm face. He shook his head and replied, "No, we must not recklessly attack. We will only strike when there is an opening." Han Tu said nothing and continued to observe the situation on the ground. After tracking and surveilling them for 3 days, Han Tu suddenly said, "There seems to be another party approaching. They have great strength and they come in a big number. I'm not sure if they are with Cage." "Where are they?" asked Han Hao. 50 miles south from Cage and rapidly closing in," replied Han Tu confidently after he closed his eyes and sensed for a moment. Han Hao released a demon general and had it fly out through a separate tunnel made by Han Tu. It avoided Cage and his party before flying in the direction Han Tu indicated. The demon generals refined by Han Hao was not as miraculous as that of the cauldron of myriad demon. Therefore, Han Hao had avoided using demon generals to track Cage lest he inadvertently alerts Cage. Around 50 miles from Cage, a group of experts who had concealed their auras was stealthily approaching Cage. "Lord Polo, Cage is a follower of Sala's. Wouldn't attacking Cage mean offending Sala's?" asked Kodiak, who was traveling beside Polo. He was hesitant about following his chief's order. Polo put on a cold, sinister smile and replied, "Sala's may be powerful, but our Godhunter alliance is even more so. The forces of our alliance spans all 12 dominions. Our supreme leader wouldn't be weaker than Sala's. We need not worry too much about him." After taking a short pause, Polo smirked and continued, "Besides, no one will find out that it was us. When the time comes, we just have to decorate the scene a little and plant a few scapegoats. Salas is not omniscient, he will never suspect us. You are right, my lord. Kodiak knew that there was nothing he could say that would change Polo's mind once he had decided on something. After killing Cage, take his head and hand it to Han Hao. Tell him to consider it as a welcoming gift from me. Polo wore a grave face as he remarked, I really did not expect that he would actually possess such tremendous power. Even though so many forces were ganging up on them, they managed to slaughter 500 people in an instant. Han Hao is a force to be reckoned with? But from what I've heard, it wasn't Han Hao who killed them, replied Kodiak. What happened outside the Omphalos that deadly evening had spread to the entire land of chaos like wildfire. Polo, being one of the powerhouses in the Fringe, learned of the incident in no time. He had had several meetings with Han Hao and knew that Han Hao was incredibly powerful. However, never in his wildest imagination that Han Hao would possess such tremendous power. Polo could tell that Han Hao will be moving his forces into the Fringe sooner or later. They were both god hunters in the God Hunter Alliance, and they were on good terms, but Polo thought that further strengthening their friendship would greatly benefit him. He saw assassinating Cage as an opportunity to accomplish that. It doesn't matter who actually killed them. What mattered is that Han Hao must have a close relationship with that being. Polo laughed mischievously and continued, knowing that is enough. That Cage has been fucking unbridled and stole a ton of our businesses. I've wanted to end him for a long time. During recent times, Cage and his men had frequently trespassed upon the territories under Kodiak's sphere of influence. It had infuriated Polo, but they couldn't touch Cage because he had Salas backing him. Kodiak stared blankly for a moment. It suddenly hit him that perhaps this was the real reason that Polo decided to assassinate Cage. Kodiak knew the temperament of his chief well. Although Polo was incredibly patient and scheming, sometimes he would do something relatively irrational out of rage. It appeared that Polo had thought about killing Cage longer than 1 or 2 days. Han Hao was just the last gentle push needed for Polo to act on this plan of his. Back in the underground tunnel, Han Hao's eyes had been rolling all around under his eyelids. He suddenly opened his eyes and softly remarked, "So it is him." Han too was puzzled and he asked, "Brother, do you know the approaching party?" Little Skeleton nodded. He was wearing a somewhat bewildered expression, as though he found it baffling that someone would try so hard to win his favor. He turned to Han too and gravely said, "Get ready, we are going to strike soon. The approaching party is not a foe but a friend. Make sure that you do not make friendly fire." "Brother, you have friends in the Fringe?" Han too turned even more confused. "Not exactly a friend. He is being friendly to me with an ulterior motive." To Han Hao, there was no such thing as friends. Other than Han Shuo and the elite zombies, everyone is either his subordinate or his enemy. He needed no friend. "Okay, understood. I'll be ready in no time," replied Han Tu excitedly. "My lord, we will be reaching our underground base soon. Lord Salas was very pleased with those ores your lordship presented. The sovereign will surely be more attentive towards us." A bald man was fawning on Cage. The gloomy and cold-looking Cage replied, "We need to use this opportunity to expand our business operation. Our size is growing fast. Soon we will be doing just big businesses," said the ambitious Cage. He would never have expected that all his followers in his base had been decimated by Han Shuo. "You are very right, my lord. Right, I hear say that Ethereal City has a new owner. Perhaps we should re-expand our trades to the city. Back then, when Baum was around, he would give us some fantastic deals every year. Maybe we could start by bribing the new city lord with something valuable," suggested the bald guy. "Shut up and stop giving me those nonsensical ideas of yours." Cage coldly groaned and reprimanded. "Did you not know who made McKinley the city lord? It was the space overlord who had personally paved the path of his ascension. Who the hell do you think we are? Don't mention or even think about Ethereal City." After hearing the rebuke, the bald man immediately lowered his head and scowled. He could not make a sound. "Enemy!" Cage suddenly cried out in alarm and put on his alerted face. He said, "Be careful, someone is approaching." Those in Cage's party were all ferocious gods who had gone through thousands of battles. Following his warning, they started paying attention to their surroundings. They noticed that the trees around them were shaking very lightly, and they heard faint rustling noises slowly moving towards them. "Hi, Cage. Long time no see?" Polo's voice sounded from behind a big tree before his tall and sturdy figure slowly came into appearance. Cage frowned, and in an annoyed voice he said, "Polo, what do you mean by this? We have never meddled with each other's businesses. What? You want to be my enemy?" "Cage, oh, Cage, haven't you noticed that you have been stretching your greedy hands a little too far?" said Polo in a sinister, cold smirk. He was buying time for his subordinates to get into position to surround Cage and his party. Cage was a veteran predator himself and was aware of his trick. When he saw the flickering light in Polo's eyes, he knew that Polo did not come here just to greet him. Cage did not bring many people with him, and his strength wasn't as valiant as Polo's. His heart trembled because he knew that he was in deep trouble. Immediately, he shrieked, "Don't you dare, Polo. If you touch me, Lord Salas will exterminate you and your men." Polo started laughing like he just heard a joke. "But how are you going to tell him that when you are fucking dead?" His laughter suddenly vanished, and he commanded in a cold voice, "Kill them!" Polo's men who had surrounded Cage and his party suddenly started charging forward, rapidly shrinking the circle. Those fierce god hunters shrieked and made intimidating noises as they launched their attacks. They started killing in groups of 3 to 5 men. They know how to fight as a team. "How dare you, Polo?" Cage was greatly alarmed. He did not expect that Polo would leave no room for discussion before killing his people. "Why would I not?" Polo started laughing again. "You really think that no one can touch you just because you have Salas covering your ass? Cage, you know what kind of a person I am, and yet you dared to be active in my territory. You should know the consequences of not respecting my boundary." Polo's smile turned more and more malevolent. He cried, "My brothers. Kill them all. Take their divine energy." Polo's subordinates were inexplicably excited, and they swarmed at Cage's party. The former had greatly outnumbered the latter by 5 to 6 times. They would strike and kill Cage's men in just moments before starting to devour their divine energy. Moments later, 5 or 6 of Cage's followers were dead. When the god hunters found suitable prey, they would turn strangely excited and be even more vicious in their attacks. Cage's men were rapidly being defeated. "Polo, we might have some misunderstanding." Cage's heart trembled harder. He did not expect that Polo would have no qualms about possibly offending Sovereign Salas. Cage only dared to intrude and conduct operations in Polo's territory because he had the backing of this enormous figure called Salas. He tested the waters by conducting a few operations in Polo's territory. When he saw that Polo took zero action, he assumed that Polo was afraid of his sovereign and therefore started acting unscrupulously. He did not expect that Polo would do absolutely nothing for so long before suddenly, with no warning, attempted to annihilate him and his gang in one sweep move. Cage was frightened. "Oh, now you are afraid? Sorry, but that's too late. I cannot let you live. If I let you walk away and you complain to Salas, it's gonna be troublesome for me." Polo laughed grimly and started charging forward to kill Cage. "Polo, don't you touch him. He is mine." Suddenly, a calm, monotonous voice sounded from the underground. Han Hao's figure bizarrely appeared on the battlefield, and he pointed the bone spear in his hand at Cage. Chapter 848, Just How Strong Is He? GDK 848, Just How Strong Is He? Polo did not expect that Han Hao would suddenly appear on the battlefield at this moment. He was astounded. Wearing an astonished expression, he asked, "Why are you here?" There was not a shred of emotion on Han Hao's face. His eyes were staring fixedly on Cage as though he was not surrounded in a chaotic battle scene. He replied, "Same as you, to kill." Polo stared blankly at Han Hao for a moment before he suddenly burst into laughter and said, "Well then, by all means, please proceed. He's all yours." That saved me some energy. As if Cage wasn't already troubled enough by Polo, Han Hao had suddenly appeared to give him a bigger headache. Cage looked at Han Hao puzzlingly. He looked back in his memories and was certain that he had never met Han Hao before. "Who are you? I don't remember meeting you. You are not one of my rivals. You have recently raided a caravan carrying ores and minerals and slaughtered a bunch of them, did you?" asked Han Hao in a cold voice instead of immediately attacking Cage. Polo's followers were still attacking Cage's. Soon, several more of Cage's followers died by having their divine energy sucked dry. The god hunters made wild, loud battle cries as they flew all around, intercepting their victims who were trying to escape. Cage felt more and more worried, and for the first time in a long time, he felt regretful. His followers were being brutally murdered, but he did not know how to handle the situation. It was obvious that Polo wouldn't have attempted the assassination without bringing forces of much greater strength and quantity than that of Cage's. He knew that escape would be very difficult. "That's right, I plundered a batch of ores not too long ago." Cage did not deny the accusation, but what has that got to do with you? You sure weren't there at that time. The only person that escaped wasn't as powerful as you. Han Hao nodded and replied, "The one who escaped is my friend. I'm here to chop your head off and bring it to him." "Ha, boastful big talk. You really think that you can stop me?" shouted Cage. He glanced at Polo and Han Hao with his cold eyes as he said, "How foolish of you to think that you can kill me. Humph, I still have more followers at my base. Once I assembled all my followers, you will know the consequences of offending Sovereign Salas and me." "Be careful, Han Hao. He might try to escape by some special means," shouted Polo. By now, most of Cage's followers had been killed. Against two formidable experts that were Polo and Han Hao, Cage knew that it was impossible to fight his way out and that he must abandon his followers. Cage knew that as long as he is alive, there is hope for recovery. Upon finishing his words, Cage took out a wind energy divine equipment that Salas had bestowed upon him, Wind Lace, and tried to leave the battlefield as soon as possible. The 7 bone spurs on Han Hao's back suddenly whooshed out following his thought. Before Cage could activate the Wind Lace, the 7 bone spurs had zipped through the air and arrived before him. Meanwhile, Han Hao, wielding his 3-meter-long bone spear, was rapidly shooting towards Cage like a fiend. Right when the Wind Lace was ready to be activated, Cage discovered that 7 dreadful energies had surrounded him, blocking him from escaping. An extremely bizarre boundary abruptly formed around him. Air and wind had stopped circulating within the boundary. Cage was appalled. He realized that it was not possible to utilize the Wind Lace inside the bizarre boundary. With the 7 bone spurs starting to attack him, Cage had no choice but to put up defenses and temporarily postponed his plan to escape. He took out a dark shield, and as soon as he raised it, intense element of darkness gushed out from it. They formed a large mass of dark clouds and enveloped him. Just like Rose, Cage possessed mid-stage high god strength in the energy of darkness. A character of his strength was considered pretty formidable among the average fringe dwellers. However, against Han Hao, who dual cultivated in the element of death and demonic arts, Cage stood little to no chance of winning. Cage felt as though the outcome of the battle had been decided ever since he was enveloped by the bizarre energy field generated by the 7 bone spurs. When Han Hao reached Cage, he was bombarded with an even more powerful wave of ferocious attacks. Including the bone spear in Han Hao's hand, the altogether 8 bone spurs whooshed all around under the control of demonic arts. They flew erratically, and every one of them carried the power to kill. They were rapidly dismantling the defenses Cage deployed using his darkness divine energy. Cage tried ramming in every direction, but realized that he could not free himself from the 8 bone spurs. Since the start of the battle, Cage could only take defensive measures. Although he had the Wind Lace, he was not able to use it. Although Polo was well acquainted with Han Hao, he did not have the chance to witness Han Hao attacking a person. Therefore, Polo at this moment had his full attention on the callous-looking Han Hao. After observing Han Hao with glistening eyes for a moment, he was yet again shocked. Even since Han Hao joined the God Hunter Alliance, many had been trying to guess his actual strength. At first, Han Hao was only barely able to defeat a mid-god. But then, one day, Han Hao managed to kill a high god. This caused everyone to reevaluate their judgment. The main reason that the God Hunters were not able to fathom Han Hao's strength was because he cultivated in demonic arts. By combining the energies of 2 different universes, Han Hao often could slaughter an expert of greater strength. Polo had heard from various sources that Han Hao was an early-stage high god of death. After meeting Han Hao several times and having sensed his aura, Polo also thought it to be true. However, what he saw right now contradicted his belief. Han Hao had demonstrated overwhelming strength against a mid-stage high god expert. Right from the beginning, Han Hao had been exerting so much pressure on Cage that the latter could not make a single counterattack. Just how powerful this fella truly is. / Polo asked himself as he watched the battle with lights twinkling from his eyes. Huck. Finally, the bizarre and unpredictable attacks of the 8 bone spurs caught Cage off guard. One of Han Hao's bone spurs stabbed his shoulder. Soon after receiving the stab, Cage felt mentally exhausted, while the divine energy in his body was circulating uncontrollably like feral horses freed from captivity. A numbing sensation started spreading from the shoulder. Cage turned to look, and he discovered that the flesh on his shoulder was slowly rotting away. It looked as though millions of tiny worms were tearing his flesh. It's venomous. Cage was greatly alarmed and horrified. After having fought Han Hao for a while, Cage discovered that the emotionless Han Hao was simply the perfect killing machine that doesn't make any mistakes. He saw that Han Hao had displayed not a single emotion throughout the battle. He was like a chess grandmaster, calmly and systematically eliminating his opponent's pieces and pushing them closer and closer to defeat with every move. Who the hell is this person? Is he even a person? How is it even possible that he doesn't have the slightest bit of emotion? The fear in Cage's mind grew as he fought Han Hao. Han Hao might be slightly better than Han Xiu at understanding and using the 9 changes realm. Perhaps it was due to the unique circumstances of his genesis. Little Skeleton would not feel the slightest emotion when he fought others. This allowed him to achieve absolute calmness of the heart and soul, entering the optimal realm state every time. One would be able to fight at his fullest potential if one was able to stay completely calm in a battle and not be affected by the opponent's provocative languages. Cage came to recognize just how terrifying it was to fight someone who could do so. Pow! A burst of the aura of death erupted from a bone spur and it slammed Cage, causing him to stagger backward. The other bone spurs that had been lying in wait suddenly swarmed at him. 3 of them broke through Cage's defenses and pierced his back. Han Hao suddenly stopped attacking. He looked at the dying Cage and said in an indifferent voice, "Those followers of yours in your underground base, I've killed them all. The savings you had, I've taken them all." When Han Hao finished those words, the 3 bone spurs stabbing on Cage suddenly turned alive and started boring into his body like worms. Crack, 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 crack. Bone-chilling noises started playing from inside Cage. Then, suddenly, blood spurted out from every one of his orifices. He was visibly losing vitality as blood escaped from his body. The 3-meter-long bone spear cut across his neck and sent his head spinning into the air. The bone spurs caught the flying, severed head and carried it into the glass container that Little Skeleton had prepared. Cage's body that lost its head abruptly exploded. The 3 bone spurs looked as though fed leeches and returned to Han Hao's spine. By now, all of Cage's followers had been killed. Polo and his god hunters were staring foolishly at Han Hao. They had witnessed Han Hao mercilessly murder Cage and saw absolutely no emotion on Han Hao's face. It was as though Han Hao was so used to doing it that he was numbed by it. I know Wonder Chief would value him so highly. This teenager is truly terrifying. He is ruthless and merciless at such a young age, not to mention powerful. He is destined to achieve greatness. Thought Kodiak. He suddenly felt that Polo's judgment power was almost as extraordinary as Han Hao. Han Hao, I guess I owe you a thank you. Polo was between laughter and tears. His original plan was to kill Cage and bring his head to Han Hao as a gift. But out of his expectation, Han Hao appeared out of nowhere and killed Cage himself. With that, instead of Han Hao owing Polo a favor, it was Polo who owed Han Hao a favor. Han Hao turned to look at Polo emotionlessly. He nodded and replied, "You are welcome. You have taken care of Cage's followers for me. We have the same goal. We don't owe each other anything." "Well, all right then." Polo thought for a moment before he asked, "If Salas investigates Cage's death, what are you going to do?" "Just find a few scapegoats nearby and throw their bodies here. Make it look like it was the other 4 sovereigns who did it." Han Hao bunched his brows slightly and continued, "Cage is just an insignificant character. I doubt that Salas cared about him as much as Cage thought he would." Polo nodded, put on a mischievous smile and said, "Indeed, we shall make it so." Chapter 849, We Don't Need Allies GDK 849. We don't need allies. Polo had been living in the fringe for many years, and he was also a cunning and treacherous character. He immediately ordered his followers to handle the matter. Soon enough, the group of god hunters led by Polo returned to the crime scene with several bodies. Wearing a treacherous smile, Kodiak reported to Polo, "Chief, these are the followers of the other 4 sovereigns. Anyone who attempts to investigate the murder will be led on a path to nowhere." "Good. Be sure to tidy up the place properly and leave no trail behind," instructed Polo. He then turned to Han Hao, smiled, and said, "I did not expect you to show up. Haha, I have heard about what you did outside the Omphalos. I'm sure that the entire land of chaos is talking about you guys." Han Hao raised an eyebrow at Polo and replied, "What exactly do you want to tell me?" "Hee hee." Polo put on a somewhat awkward smile and said, "If you are going to expand in the fringe, then, as members of the Alliance, as we are on good terms with each other, it is only proper that we should be assisting each other. Don't you think?" "Yes, that is true," replied Han Hao with an expressionless face. But after taking a short pause, he bunched his brows and asked, "What exactly do you mean by assisting each other?" "We god hunters and the 5 sovereign have always kept to our own businesses. If you wish to expand your influence in the fringe, you will inevitably come into contact with the 5 sovereigns." "Yes, and based on my understanding of the sovereigns, confrontation is only a matter of time. What I'm saying is, I'm willing to take your side." Polo was somewhat hesitant when he said those words. Having lived in the fringe for many years, he knew just how ferocious the sovereigns could be. It was not easy for him to come to this decision. Han Hao seemed to be interested. His purple demon eye glistened, and he scanned Polo before he curiously asked, "In what way are you going to stand by my side?" "As an ally?" "That's right, an ally," affirmed Polo. "Oh." Han Hao's face returned to showing no emotion. He shook his head and replied, "We need no allies." Then, with his eyes staring straight at Polo, he continued, "Polo, if you are genuine, you should hand your followers to me and you too should serve me." That proposal was way off Polo's original intention. He was stunned by the bold proposal for a long time. After finally coming to his senses, Polo frowned and said, "Han Hao, I admit, you are extraordinarily powerful. However, in the God Hunter Alliance, my reputation is no less than yours. Besides, I have been living in the fringe for far longer than you have. You sure you aren't joking?" Han Hao nodded solemnly. "You decide for yourself. In short, I do not need allies." Han Hao sensed a minute vibration from the ground. He knew that Han, too, must be starting to get worried because he wasn't sure what was going on the surface. Han Hao therefore did not take the time to persuade Polo but succinctly summarized, "On account that you have helped me today, I will not make an enemy of you. Go back and think about it. Don't take too long." Upon finishing those words, Han Hao turned away and took to the sky without giving the god hunters another look. Polo and his god hunters stared at the leaving Han Hao foolishly. Like a shadow, he vanished into the horizon in no time. Moments later, Polo woke up from his daze. Gloomily, he remarked, "You sure are an arrogant brat, Han Hao." Polo seemed to be in a bad mood. Given his position in the God Hunter Alliance, his strength, and the forces he commanded, Polo considered himself generous to be Han Hao's ally. However, not only had Han Hao declined his olive branches, but he expected Polo to bow to him. Polo felt as though his good intention was returned with a snub. Kodiak was angry. "Chief, that youngster is an arrogant, conceited brat. We have done all this for nothing." Polo grunted. "Let's see how he will do in the fringe. There is no need for us to decide in haste. HMPH, if he could demonstrate that level of strength, I will consider serving him." Over on the other side, Han Shuo, Rose, and the party continued to roam all around the fringe. Ramen, Han Shuo's latest follower, was among the party. Ever since Ramen emerged from the swamp, he had willingly and fully accepted Han Shuo as his master. He submitted to Han Shuo because he felt the enormous transformation to his body and the benefits that Han Shuo had brought. In just over 10 days, the capacity of Ramen's body was substantially raised. At the mere thought, he could turn his body into the toughest metal or transform into any melee weapon of any form. He could even spurt toxins. He had transformed into a very unique being, not to mention an extremely powerful one. "Master, if any of them are not willing to serve you, leave them to me. Hee, I will beat them until they do," said Ramen. He wished to prove his worth to Han Shuo. Ramen, what the hell are you talking about? Rose whined. They are our friends and we are here to invite them. How could you do that to your friends? It is their honor to serve master. I'm only helping them realize it. Every other time Ramen opened his mouth, he was sure to give praise to Han Shuo. In his mind, Han Shuo was more a miracle than any of the 5 sovereigns. Han Shuo smiled, but he did not take Ramen's words seriously. He asked Rose, "We are almost there, right?" "Yes, he should be on that bald mountain right ahead of us. I hope he still lives there," answered Rose, who was leading the party. Moments later, Rose was standing on a mountain completely barren at its top. She shouted with her clear voice, "Zavik!" Out of nowhere, a lightning struck across the sky. A short, thin figure appeared on the mountain. The petite old man had a vile face that looked all around before he laughed out loud and said, "Rose, it's you. I have heard about what happened outside the Omphalos recently and learned that Buzz and Bertha were killed. I also heard that you were there. At first, I thought that they had distorted the story, but look, here you are." That hunched old man was no more than 5 feet tall. He was a mid-stage high god of lightning. Despite his grotesque features, his eyes showed genuine kindness and a trace of gratitude when he looked at Rose. "I'm glad that you are still alive," said Rose in her rare smile. She then introduced him to Han Shuo. "This is Zavik. I've mentioned him before. What you see on the outside might deceive you, but I know that he is good on the inside. He is sincere to his friends." After introducing Zavik, Rose was peculiarly bashful. He took a glance at Han Shuo as he said to Zavik, "This is Brian, the master I now serve. He killed Buzz and Bertha." Zavik was amazed. He carefully looked up and down at Han Shuo several times and found Han Shuo to be unbelievably young. After seeing those standing behind Han Shuo, he recalled the rumors about the incident outside Omphalos, and he became even more surprised. He thought, could these youngsters be the ferocious experts who killed 500 or 600 fringe dwellers? I have heard a little about what happened at the Omphalos. Haha, I must say I did not expect you all to be so young," remarked Zavik. He then smilingly asked, "Little Rose, what have you come to me for?" "Zavik, don't hole up to cultivate anymore. Work for my master?" invited Rose solemnly. Zavik was not astonished. It was almost as if he had expected Rose to say so. He did not immediately agree or decline, but smiled. Zavik turned to Han Shuo and asked, "Of the 5 sovereigns of the fringe, do you have the confidence to fight any one of them?" Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment before he calmly shook his head and answered, "I have not tried it, no confidence at all." After taking a short pause, Han Shuo continued, "However, I'm not afraid. You are very young. When the 5 sovereigns were your age, they definitely weren't as strong as you are," remarked Zavik. He was somewhat baffled by how forthcoming Han Shuo was. He thought for a bit, bunched his brows, and asked, "Do you have the confidence to escape from any of the sovereigns?" Han Shuo thought about it for a moment and nodded assuredly. He smilingly answered, "This, I'm confident. Not just one, even if 2 or 3 of them come for me, I know I can escape." "Then that'll do. As long as you can preserve your life, there's a very good chance that you will surpass the 5 sovereigns." Zavik seemed gratified, as though it was enough for him to know that Han Shuo could escape from a sovereign. "All right, on account that Rose has saved my life before, I'm willing to serve you. If someday in the future I'm killed by the 5 sovereigns, I'd be very happy to know that there's a chance that you would avenge my death." He sure is a strange one. I remarked Han Shuo inwardly. He thought for a moment before he solemnly pledged, "I will do my best to make sure that you and my followers stay alive. But if any of you get killed, don't worry, I will take revenge for you and kill the person, no matter who he is." "That's enough," Zavik laughed happily. "Please don't mind it. I'm the kind of person who thinks about the escape route before anything. I know that against any of the 5 sovereigns, all escape routes would be useless. If something unfortunate were to happen to me, I would die at peace knowing that someone will avenge my death. Don't you worry about it. I'm certain that our master will be triumphant. HMPH, I'd like to see just how strong the 5 sovereigns are." Ramen's confidence had swelled after his strength soared. He had become so arrogant that no one else mattered other than Han Shuo and Han Jin. Han Shuo looked at Ramen but said nothing. He turned to Rose and said, "Let's keep going." For the next few days, Rose led Han Shuo and the party to every corner of the fringe. Unfortunately for them, those friends of Rose had either been killed or relocated. They made no further findings. However, Han Shuo was not disheartened by it. Instead of returning to Omphalos, he decided to continue wandering all around the fringe to select a suitable site as his new base. Naturally, Han Shuo would only select an area suitable for deploying demonic formations. After wandering for a few days, he finally found a remote valley. Chapter 850, Over God. GDK 850, Over God? The yin aura inside the valley was spellbinding. Han Shuo felt chills as he approached the region. Clouds and mist were winding around the valley like a very slow cyclone. Coupled with the flourishing flora, the valley was dreamlike. Rose liked the place at first glance. She softly exclaimed, "I could get used to this. Fresh air and a beautiful landscape." Ramen and Zavik were too shy to give their opinions as they were still new to serving Han Shuo. After taking a good look around, they found the region to be mostly identical to most places in the fringe, nothing unique about it. Furthermore, this region was rather remote, and the intensity of elemental energies was nothing outstanding. Han Mu walked into the lush forest and took a deep breath. He closed his eyes and sensed the trees, shrubs, and grass all around him. When he exhaled, he opened his eyes and grinned, "Wonderful. I quite like it here." Han Jin, Han Huo, and Han Shui also looked around the region and stated their opinions. Han Jin discovered rare ore deposits in the depths of the valley, while Han Shui located waterfalls and water bodies nearby. They too were happy with the area. Han Huo, however, after making a circle, seemed rather upset. "The region is all wet and humid. There isn't a single dry spot. If I stay here, my energy will never thrive. It would be great if there's a volcano nearby." Han Shuo couldn't help but laugh. He knew that it was very difficult to locate a place that would satisfy the needs of all 5 elite zombies, if not impossible. Han Shu released his demon generals and had them circle around to check if anyone was inhabiting the region. "Ramen, Zavik, you too have been living in the fringe. Tell me, do you know if anyone is occupying this region?" Han Shu did not want to create friction with the 5 sovereigns, for now. He wanted to avoid any unnecessary conflicts as much as possible. "Sorry, Master, I do not know. Before serving you, I rarely ever left that swamp," answered Ramen. "Well, I, however, am quite aware of the situation around here," said Zavik smilingly. When Han Shu's gaze turned to him, Zavik continued, "You have nothing to worry about. This place is considered remote in the fringe. None of the sovereign's followers would occupy this region. Besides, there aren't any particularly powerful forces around this region. If you wish to establish your base here, I believe that there won't be much of an issue." Although Zavik was willing to serve Han Shuo, as he had yet to witness Han Shuo's overwhelming power, his mind was not completely convinced. Therefore, Zavik did not address Han Shuo as master, as Ramen did. Han Shuo noticed that, but he did not mind it, nor did he demand Zavik to address him properly. In fact, he wasn't going to mention it at all. This was because Han Shuo was confident that in time, he could impress Zavik and make Zavik accept him as his master from the bottom of his heart. "Very well then. Seclusion does have its benefits, after all," remarked Han Shuo. He started considering whether he should immediately begin the mega construction project that he had in mind. "Sorry, Master, but I cannot understand why you would select this location." Ramen had hesitated, but in the end, he had to voice his doubts. "We are so isolated here and so very far from the Omphalos. And there's nothing special about this terrain. The valley is too accessible. It will be easy for our enemy to attack. But most importantly, the elemental energy around the valley is weak. We will have to invest a ton of time and effort into this place. Will it be worth it?" Zavik was equally puzzled by Han Shuo's decision. He too was looking at Han Shuo doubtfully. Rose, however, having been around Han Shuo for such a long time, knew that Han Shuo was capable of all sorts of magnificent things. Instead of worrying that Han Shuo might have made a mistake, she was guessing what kind of transformation he would bring to the valley. An average person wouldn't know how to take advantage of the terrain and geography found here, and so they wouldn't know that this place is a gem hiding in plain sight. "Oh, don't you worry about it. When I'm done with this place, you will find out why I have selected this valley," said Han Shuo confidently. The center of the valley was actually a naturally formed yin-gathering formation, but it was incomplete. Once Han Shuo made the necessary adjustments and the formation was whole, the elemental energies would automatically converge towards the valley. Han Shuo could harness the yin-gathering formation at its core as a power source. With enough materials, and using the powers of the 5 elite zombies, he could build a large number of demonic formations in and around the valley. Given sufficient time, energy, and resources, Han Shuo could turn the valley into an impenetrable fortress. It would be even deadlier and formidable than Sala's Empyrean Peak. Although Ramen was still puzzled, after seeing the confidence shown by Han Shuo, he did not question any further. Zavik also did not say a thing, but it was clear from his eyes that he was still skeptical. He thought, this is a wasteland. I'd be impressed if you could turn it into anything but that. Little gold, go to the mountain ranges nearby and get some basic ores for building. Bring the 2 along. Rose, there's a waterfall and pond right behind there. You may bathe there if you want to. Ramen, Rose, and Zavik couldn't help Han Shuo with deploying demonic formations, therefore he asked them to help with the menial tasks or to rest. Ramen, come with me. You are most suited for moving things. Hanjin knew that Ramen's body was filled with rare metals. Not only was he incredibly strong, but he was also able to differentiate many rare ores. In Hanjin's mind, Ramen was now one of his Goldstone Enterprises workers. Zavik was very curious and wanted to watch Han Shuo make the transformation. However, he knew that it was usually a taboo to do so. Thus, he followed Han Jin and Ramen along with no further objections. I shall go look around, said Rose, before she flew in the direction of the pond, as indicated by Han Shuo. Han Shuo had placed at least 1 demon general for each mile across the region, allowing him to immediately detect if Rose, Zavik, or the others were in distress. Han Shuo hardly had to worry about their safety. What a shame that Little Earth isn't here. Well, I guess most of the underground projects will have to be postponed until Little Earth returns. Han Shuo lamented after the others took off. He then started instructing Han Mu and Han Huo to help him with the initial construction. Han Shuo wanted to focus his future growth on the fringe, because this land was not bound to any of the 12 overgods' dominions. Although the competition was incredibly fierce, he got to enjoy absolute freedom. Knowing that he would be in the game for the long run, Han Shuo wanted to make sure that his lair would be well thought out and built to the highest standards. As Han Shuo's strength increased, he became more skilled in using demonic formations while his understanding of them improved. With the assistance of the Cauldron of Myriad Demon, Han Shuo could deploy all sorts of complex and cryptic formations, provided that he could source the necessary materials for it. In the following days and nights, Han Shuo continuously flew back and forth around the valley. With the assistance of the Cauldron of Myriad Demon and the 4 elite zombies, Han Shuo started to architect his demonic dungeon and reconstruct the valley. The lush trees and vegetation covering the valley started to rapidly grow and became abnormally oversized, as though they had been injected with steroids. The trees became as tall as mountains, and the dense foliage shielded from the sun like massive dark clouds. The trees had not just grown taller, but their positions had changed. They were repositioned to form an abstruse but harmonic design. Meanwhile, the shrubs growing on the ground thickened and toughened and bestowed with brand new shredding capabilities. If one was to fall into the shrubs, they would be swarmed and effectively pulverized. Monumental stones of various qualities were placed all around the valley. Carved into them were wicked shapes or hieroglyphic runes. In addition, they were all colorful and glowed with diabolical radiances. The yin aura in the valley grew even thicker, and chilling winds blew from nowhere. Any ordinary person who stepped into the valley would feel uncomfortable and inexplicably frightened. The valley had taken on a new life. Ramen, Zavik, and Rose saw the changes to the valley. However, it only made them more puzzled as they had no idea what purpose those transformations would serve. Then, one day, Han Shuo asked metal, wood, fire, and water elite zombies to put down their work with the demonic formations and gathered up everyone, including Rose, Ramen, and Zavik. He gladly announced, I have yet to fully put everything in order as one of my sons isn't here and we do not have enough materials. Right now, the valley is only 1/5 complete. Han Shuo took a short pause before he continued, I have gathered everyone so that you can have a look at our work so far. What you are about to see will be just 1/5 of the final result, but still, the changes will be quite considerable. Raman, Rose, and Zavik looked forward to witnessing the results. Apart from the great changes to the facade, they wondered what other miraculous transformation Han Shuo's magic would bring to the valley. Under their attentive gazes, the cauldron of myriad demon flew out from Han Shuo's body and immediately started zipping all around the valley. Bursts of light shot out from the cauldron and landed on the center of demonic formations all around the valley, activating them. After making a ring around the valley, the cauldron finally flew to the monolith at the center. Several streaks of brilliant rays shot out from the cauldron and traveled along the stone's surface. Cracking noises came from the monolith that was being engraved before their eyes. Soon, an outline of the cauldron could be seen on the monolith. A demon general made from High God's soul bellowed as it flew into the inscribing on the monolith. The engraved cauldron immediately started to sparkle as though something had been awoken. Rumbles rocked from underneath the valley like some colossal machine was operating, and the monolith was the starter key to the machine. Then, unexpectedly, the elemental energies between heaven and earth started flowing and gathering towards the valley. The elemental energies grew denser and denser. How is this possible? Zavik's face was filled with disbelief, and he could not be more appalled. No, not even the 5 sovereigns possess the power to alter the operation of natural forces. Which of the 12 overgods are you? Chapter 851, Nope, 2-week GDK 851. Nope, 2-week Zavik was flabbergasted. To his knowledge, on the entire Elysium, only the overgods who possessed the quintessences could alter and rewrite the operation of natural forces. The originally unexceptional concentration of elemental energies in the valley had suddenly spiked. This was not something that an average god could accomplish. Even the 5 sovereigns weren't able to do such a thing if they did not wield the quintessences. Zavik took a moment to carefully sense the environment. He was yet again shocked, for he discovered that the concentration of all 8 elemental energies had increased. An overgod was only able to alter the concentration of the element they cultivated. This meant that unless the 8 respective overgods joined hands, no being could accomplish what Han Shu just did. Zavik was stupefied, and he almost could not believe his senses. Rose and Raman were also incredibly amazed. It was unbelievable even to Rose, who knew a thing or two about Han Shuo's brilliance. She had seen Han Shuo deploy demonic formations of serious firepower, but she had never seen him deploy one that could gather elemental energies. Any gods who cultivated in a region of higher elemental energy concentration could make progress multiple times faster compared to their counterparts in places of lower concentration. In other words, those who cultivated in this valley could grow stronger much faster than others. This would be a terrifying advantage to have, but the transformation hadn't stopped yet. While Zavik and the others were still in shock, the elemental energies everywhere continued to gather towards the valley. Han Shuo kept smiling, but said nothing other than to ask his servants to keep watching. Half an hour later, the concentration of elemental energies continued to elevate before it finally stabilized, at 30 times the original concentration. Zavik's mouth was wide open. He flew all around to survey the valley as he mumbled to himself, How is this possible? Of the party, only the 4 elite zombies were not surprised. The 4 little fellas knew just how miraculous Han Shu's demonic arts were. The places of extreme yuan that they were born from had elemental energies even denser than was found in this region. After a long time, Zavik finally managed to slightly calm down. He asked Han Shuo, How did you do that? Zavik's gaze towards Han Shuo had completely changed to show reverence. Han Shuo smiled and calmly replied, Perhaps I'm no match for the 5 sovereigns for now, but the energy which I master has the potential to far exceed all the sovereigns. What I've done to the valley here may seem unimaginable to you, but it's a normal day's work to me. Master, you must be more powerful than the 5 sovereigns. I doubt that the 5 sovereigns could accomplish what you could. Raman admired Han Shuo even more after witnessing the transformation to the valley. As I've said, the transformation you see now is not the final result. When my other son returns, we will be able to complete the whole thing, and the valley will be operating at a much higher capacity. said Han Shuo, before he walked to the monolith engraved with the outline of the cauldron of myriad demon. He fiddled with a few things, and the intense elemental energies gradually started dissipating from the valley. We will leave the valley in its original state and head to the Omphalos. The next time that we are here, we will complete the stronghold. Han Shuo, Han Hao, and Han Tu had an appointment at the Omphalos. In addition, Goron and the other experts that Han Shuo had recruited will also wait for him at the Omphalos. Han Shuo wished to assemble everyone at the center of the fringe and return to this valley. By now, Zavik could not be more impressed by Han Shuo's marvelous abilities. He felt that Han Shuo must have the strength to contend against the 5 sovereigns. After thinking for a moment, Han Shuo decided to conceal the demonic formations in the valley. After the elemental energies dispersed and returned to normal levels, other than the unusually lush plants, the valley appeared quite ordinary. The party left the valley, which Han Shuo temporarily named Pandemonium, and headed to the center of the fringe, the Empyrean Peak. The mountain that pierced through the clouds was guarded by layers upon layers of boundaries. Brightly shining energy towers stood in every corner. Near the mountain's summit was a majestic palace where a 3-meter-tall man was sitting on the throne. His thick beard was meticulously woven into many small braids dangling over his chest. His eyes, as deep as the sea, were looking straight ahead. He exuded a terrifying demeanor even though he was in a calm mood. In the hall, below his throne, several late-stage high god experts were crouching before him. They were all characters of great power and influence in the fringe, but they were incredibly humble while in the palace. One of them was an expert who had tried to recruit Han Shuo outside the Omphalos. "Culver, are you sure about what you've just said?" asked the godly and muscular man sitting on the throne curiously as he looked at those crouching under his feet. Culver raised his head and revealed his revering eyes. He respectfully replied, "Lord Salas, I've witnessed it with my own eyes. Although that youngster appears to have ordinary strength, his true strength is very formidable." Culver took a short pause before he continued, "I suspect that his true strength exceeds that of a high god." Tiny electrical sparks suddenly started meandering in Sala's pupils as though he was thinking. A moment later, Salas nodded. He spoke in a very calm voice. "From your recount, that youngster should possess strength above the high god realm, but you said that you couldn't tell which energy he cultivated in." "Strange. Very strange." After a short pause, Salas instructed, "Culver, drop all the work you have for now and investigate everything about this youngster. His emergence could potentially upset the status quo. The 5 of us have been recouping our energy for some time now and will enter a great battle soon. This youngster could be a game changer. If he will not stand on my side, I shall finish him myself." "Yes, my lord. Your humble servant will investigate this person thoroughly," pledged Culver hastily. Salas nodded, gestured with his hand, and said, "You are dismissed." Salas then suddenly remembered something. He bunched his brows and instructed, "The trace I left on Cage has vanished. He's been killed. Find out who did it." "Yes, my lord," replied Culver respectfully. "Now go," said Salas after he nodded. An enormous lightning bolt suddenly appeared on the throne and shot straight up as Salas vanished. Densely packed lightning bolts suddenly appeared everywhere around the Empyrean Peak. "Brother, why hasn't father returned yet?" the board-stiff Han Tu asked Han Hao. The two had been waiting for Han Shuo and the others in the Omphalos for several days. "They have probably been held up by something," replied Han Hao casually. He was sitting cross-legged with his eyes closed in a secluded spot of the Omphalos. He was as still as a statue. "Do you think father has run into some kind of trouble? The Fringe has 5 sovereigns who are more powerful than high gods. Are they capable of capturing father?" asked Han Tu again out of boredom. "Nope," replied Han Hao even more succinctly. Seeing that Han Hao was not interested in conversing, Han Tu sighed and stopped asking. "Excuse me, are you Han Hao?" A weak, hesitant voice suddenly sounded. Several mid-god teenagers were looking at the two nervously from a distance. It seemed as though they wanted to talk to Han Hao but were too shy. Han Hao opened his sinister eyes slightly and took a glance at the teenagers before closing his eyes again. He replied indifferently, "Yes." The teenagers had just mid-god strengths, and Han Hao deemed them too weak to hurt him or Han Tu. The teenagers seemed somewhat excited after hearing Han Hao acknowledge his identity. They exchanged glances and enthusiastically approached Han Hao. One of them hastily said, "We have heard of your deeds and admire you greatly. We have all been banished from our family clans, and we have nothing but black crystal coins. We do not want to live the rest of our lives trapped in the Amphilos. Will you please take us as your followers?" The other teenagers also voiced their willingness and excitement. But Han Hao did not even give them another look before he replied, "Nope, you bunch are too weak." The teenagers seemed embarrassed and dispirited after hearing the answer. They looked at each other, and they were temporarily at a loss. "You know, the Fringe has 5 sovereigns. Why don't you look for them?" asked Han Tu, grinning. Unlike Han Hao, he was bored and was interested in making conversations. "They don't give a damn about the lives of their followers. We are afraid that we will be sent on a suicidal mission or be killed just because they don't like us," replied a pretty and innocent-looking lady timidly. She did not look evil, and the Fringe did not look like the place for her. The Fringe was a place where the strong were honored, and the 5 sovereigns practiced the law faithfully. For characters of their strengths, serving a sovereign would not guarantee their safety at all. Even if they did not die to their opponents in constant fierce battles, they could lose their lives to their own superiors for accidentally offending them. There was a large number of ferocious gods from all around Elysium traveling into the Fringe every day. These gods would try to become servants of the sovereigns to survive in the Fringe. Therefore, the sovereigns would always have plenty of experts to spare. "How much black crystal coins do you have?" Han Hao, who had been sitting cross-legged, suddenly opened his eyes and asked the youngsters. Chapter 852. You must also obey him. GDK 852. You must also obey him. One of the teenagers stared blankly for a moment. They did not understand why Han Hao would ask such a thing. "Well, we carried quite a lot of black crystal coins when we entered the Fringe. We wouldn't have been able to live in the Amphilos till now if not," one of them half answered after hesitating for a moment. These teenagers originated from various dominions. They were either degenerates, or they must have done something reprehensible. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been excommunicated by their families and banished to the Fringe. The fact that they could afford to live in the Amphilos for years, spending at least 100 black crystal coins per day, meant that they had plenty on hand. Han Hao carefully looked at the youngsters, bunched his brows, and started thinking. He remained silent for a while before he announced, "I will take you as my followers, but each of you will have to pay 500,000 black crystal coins as fees. I will not guarantee your safety. In fact, you will be in constant danger. However, I will guarantee that no one will be treated as cannon footers." "What, 500,000? The timid-looking girl cried out in surprise. The teenagers looked at each other and found the decision difficult. 500 black crystal coins was no small fortune for the teenagers. It was more than enough for them to live safely in the Amphilos for at least a decade. To pay that amount of black crystal coins in exchange for exposing themselves to constant danger didn't seem rational to them. "You all came from family clans from all 12 dominions. I promise that if you follow me, when you gain sufficient strength, I will assist you in retaking what is rightfully yours from your family clans. And, of course, I will help you take care of the people who have forced you to flee your home," said Han Hao calmly after he noticed their hesitation. Han Hao then gestured at them to leave as he said, "Go back and think about it carefully. If you do not have sufficient strength, even if I were to hand you your family clan, would you be able to secure it?" The teenagers seemed somewhat tempted by Han Hao's words. They again looked at each other and thought about Han Hao's proposal. Then, one of them said, "Your words do make sense. We shall go back to discuss it. It's not easy for all of us to take out 500 black crystal coins, after all." Han Hao again closed his eyes and returned to being still and silent like a statue. The teenagers bowed at Han Hao before they left with their brows bunched. Right after they left, Han Tu hastily asked, "Brother, why would you want them?" "They hail from family clans of influence from various dominions. If we can groom these fellas under our doctrine, with their blood relations and our assistance, we could install them as the patriarchs of their family clans. We would, in turn, have control over those family clans. I asked for 500,000 black crystal coins only to cripple their way out. It is only when they are penniless that they won't think of escaping to the Amphilos whenever they run into danger. Only then could they bring out their fullest potential. These people have been taking all sorts of divine essences since they were young, therefore they should have decent aptitude and potential. All that they lack is real combat experience and baptism through blood. I will give them those," explained Han Hao after he opened his eyes to look at Han Tu. Then, he lectured, "Little Earth, besides improving your strength, you should also better your understanding of the ways of the world. Try to understand what and how people think. It is only with a greater worldly wisdom that you can be more helpful to Father." Han Tu put on a contemplative look after hearing Han Hao's words. He thought that Han Hao was without any reservations fully deserving of being their big brother. He didn't just possess greater strength, but also greater wisdom and intelligence. "Got it, brother?" Han Tu could not be more in awe of his eldest brother. He thought, "I eldest brother is so farsighted that he could think 100 steps ahead of others. No wonder he has risen so high so fast in the Death Dominion." I Han Shuo, Ramen, Zavik, Rose, and the elite zombies were nearing the Omphalos. As soon as they arrived at the entry checkpoint, that Omphalos guard who had previously given Han Shuo kind warnings laughed out loud and greeted, "Hello, friend. Welcome back." It was also this person who divulged Cage's whereabouts to Han Shuo. Although he had not shown any evil intent so far, as he was a servant to one of the sovereigns, Han Shuo remained cautious towards him. Han Shuo smilingly said, "Hey, it's you again. What a coincidence. Are you always manning this checkpoint?" "No, but it will be so for the foreseeable future," replied the person before he put on a serious face and said, "I have not properly introduced myself last time. They call me Liulong, a servant of Sovereign Asura. May I know your name, sir?" "I'm Brian. I'm new to the Fringe and would appreciate any kind advice you may have," replied Han Shuo calmly. He handed some crystal coins to Liulong, received several small badges, and distributed them to Ramen and the others. "Hee, I heard that Cage is dead. Sala's people are looking for the killer," said Liulong in a soft voice after he suddenly put on a smirk. He looked intensely at Han Shuo to observe the emotions on his face. Han Shuo had experienced all kinds of situations and all kinds of people. It was clear to Han Shuo what Liulong was attempting. He acted as though he was surprised and replied, "What? Darn it. I heard that he managed to plunder some very rare ores and I have been looking to buy some off him. But who would have thought that he'd be murdered so soon? How unfortunate." After a short pause, Han Shuo curiously asked, "Do you know who killed him and where the ores are?" Liulong had been observing Han Shuo's expressions attentively but noticed nothing unusual. "Iha. He has nothing to do with Cage's death? That's strange." I thought Liulong before he shook his head and replied, "I only know that his head had been cut off. There were bodies of Sovereign Tyre and Log's followers around him. Nobody knew who did it. However, I do know about those ores. Cage had submitted them to Sovereign Salas as a tribute." Han Shuo pretended to stare blankly for a moment before he grimaced, shook his head, and said, "Since it's with Sovereign Salas, I guess it's not possible to get those ores. He definitely won't be in any shortage of black crystal coins. I guess I will just give up on that." Han Shuo was secretly rejoicing when he heard that Cage had been murdered and that no damning evidence had been left behind. It left no shroud of doubt in his mind about Han Hao's capabilities. Meanwhile, Metal Elite Zombie, who was standing not far behind Han Shuo, was grinning ear to ear. He knew that Han Hao must have had something to do with Cage's death, and he grew to admire his eldest brother even more. "It's good that you'd think so. That Salas is a lunatic. Few in the Fringe would even try to do business with him," remarked Liulong very softly. Then, Liulong suddenly leaned closer to Han Shuo and invited in a low voice, "Mr. Brian, the master to whom I answer, Sovereign Asura would like to meet you. Would you be interested?" Han Shuo was stunned. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Sovereign Asura, like to meet me?" Han Shuo paused briefly before he put on a faint smile and replied, "You should know that I'm not interested in working for anyone, not even the 5 sovereigns." "You have misunderstood me," Liulong hastily clarified. "Sovereign Asura definitely has no such intention. I will guarantee you that. Actually, his sovereignty is seeking opportunities for cooperation with Mr. Brian in the Fringe. Sir, Brian, even if you do not wish to kowtow to any powerhouse, even with your extraordinary strength, it is still necessary to have friends in this tangled and complicated place called the Fringe." Those words of Liulong had managed to invoke Han Shuo's interest. Although it was true that Han Shuo would not yield and bow to any of the powerhouses, he was more than willing to work with a sovereign to defeat other sovereigns. After thinking about it, Han Shuo smiled. Very well then, you may go set up the meeting. I will stay in the Omphalos for a few days, just notify me after it has been arranged. All right, I will do just that. I shall not bother Mr. Brian any longer. Liulong seemed very happy after hearing Han Shuo agreed to meet his master. He shouted at his guards, I want you all to remember their faces. They are guests of Lord Asura. Make sure that they have a pleasant stay. Kick anyone who tries to give them trouble out of the Omphalos. Han Shuo nodded smilingly before he stepped into the Omphalos with Rose and the others. With one thought of his consciousness, Han Shuo immediately located Han Hao and Han Tu's positions. He immediately led his party towards their location. Han Shuo grew even more reassured of Han Hao's safety after hearing about Cage's death. It wasn't just because of Han Hao's strength, but also for his ability to execute a mission to such perfection that even Liulong had not suspected him. This showed that his intelligence had far exceeded an average being on Elysium. As Han Shuo was relishing in the amazement, he arrived at a secluded region of the Omphalos. As he got closer, he saw the cold-looking Han Hao sitting cross-legged upon a boulder. Several teenagers wearing luxurious, expensive clothing were kowtowing before him, solemnly vowing their devotion to Han Hao. They also took out large amounts of black crystal coins and respectfully presented them to Han Hao. When the crystal coins were presented, Han Tu put on a big smile and stepped forward to receive the crystal coins on behalf of Han Hao. He even patted on their shoulders in a friendly manner and said, Good, good. From now on, we are all on the same boat. Haha. Han Hao raised his head and glanced at Han Shuo and his party who were approaching in the distance. He solemnly instructed the teenagers, Remember this, in addition to me, you must also obey him. And he pointed at Han Shuo. Chapter 853, Han Hao, my son. GDK 853. Han Hao, my son. Han Shuo was rather surprised. He did not know how or why Han Hao had taken in these good-for-nothing teenagers. Han Shuo stared blankly for a bit before he nodded and asked, Has it been settled? It's settled, replied Han Hao. After taking a short pause, Han Hao instructed those teenagers who had just pledged their undying devotion to him, Go and get prepared. Remember the signals I taught you. I will bring you guys along when I leave the Omphalos. That's all. Dismissed. The teenagers looked at Han Shuo to remember his face. Some seemed puzzled, but no one asked a question. They left submissively, as Han Hao had instructed. After they left, Han Hao started explaining to Han Shuo his plans with the teenagers and gave a simplified recount of Cage's assassination. After hearing everything, Han Shuo smiled as he said, Very good. Well done. I knew you would handle the task well. Han Shuo was surprised to find that Han Hao had thought of controlling those family clans by nurturing the teenagers. He did not expect Han Hao to develop such sophisticated thinking. Let me introduce you. This is Ramen and this is Zavik, our new members, Han Shuo said to Han Hao. He then turned to the two, pointed at the grave teenager, and proudly said, This is Han Hao, my son. Ramen had rarely ever left his swamp and did not have much contact with the outside world. Zavik, however, had heard of Han Hao's name. He stared for a moment before asking with a shaky voice, The God-hunter leader from the Death Dominion? Much to Han Shuo's bewilderment, his son was famous. He looked at Zavik and asked, How did you know that? Zavik learned from Han Shuo's response that his suspicion was indeed true. Astonished, Zavik gasped, So it's him. A large number of ferocious criminals from all 12 dominions enter the Fringe every day, so we are more or less aware of things happening all around Elysium. Besides, the Death Dominion isn't particularly far from the Fringe. We get hold of information around there relatively easily. Han Hao is highly reputable in the Death Dominion. There is hardly a soul, dead or alive, in the Death Dominion that doesn't know his name. Han Hao had on the same indifferent face as though his emotions were not at all affected by Zavik's words. He seemed to have little interest in Zavik. He took out a glass container and tossed it at Han Jin as he said, Little gold, this is for you. Huh, Cage's head. Zavik promptly wrapped his mouth with his hands, realizing that he shouldn't have shouted. Just like Cage, Zavik also possessed mid-stage high god strength. But unlike the former, Zavik did not command a large group of ferocious gods. It was recently that news about Cage's death started spreading. Everyone had been guessing who the murderer was. Zavik did not expect to see Cage's severed head being tossed out by Han Hao. "Thank you, big brother." Han Jin caught the glass container. Then he suddenly exclaimed as though he found something pleasantly surprising. "Brother, is Cage's soul still inside?" Han Hao nodded and explained, "He is still conscious. I have trapped his soul in a corner of his skull. He has no divine energy left, so you can torture him as much as you like. Right, after you are done toying with him, just hand his soul to father." "Ha, wonderful," said Han Jin delightedly. He started laughing mischievously at the glass container and injected golden light into it. The party was in a rather desolate part of the Omphalos, and Han Hao had deployed a boundary before he took out Cage's head. The boundary blocked the senses of all outsiders and could prevent all those outside the boundary from snooping into what was happening within. Zavik stared at Han Hao with astonishment, for it seemed to him that Han Hao should not possess the strength to kill Cage. But there was Cage's severed head right before him. "Ramen, you will help Han Jin and the others stroll around the Omphalos to purchase some materials. Zavik, you know this land best. Go and scout around, check for the latest news about the fringe. Look out for unusual activities," commanded Han Shuo. "Understood." Zavik, Ramen, and the others went straight to work. Many of the demonic formations in the pandemonium lacked their main ingredients. Although Han Jin and Han Mu could obtain some of the ores and wooden materials, the resources exploitable in that area were limited. Therefore, Han Shuo had to come to the Omphalos to purchase the materials he needed. As the only trading center found at the heart of the fringe, all kinds of peculiar items were for sale. Many of the openly traded items would never be found in any of the 12 dominions. For example, some extremely potent poisons, vicious divine weapons made from the skulls of gods, magical devices powered by the soul energies of imprisoned divine souls, and the like. Everything that was illegal in the 12 dominions could be openly practiced here. God hunting, organ trafficking, experimenting with poisons on living gods, no one would give a damn about it. All kinds of perverted, wicked, and deranged alchemists and poison makers were found in abundance in the fringe. These professions usually thrived in the Omphalos. They regularly exchanged the results of their evil research for large sums of black crystal coins, allowing them to continue living safely in the Omphalos. They would then have more funds to conduct even more research and to better themselves in their fields. To Han Shuo, this had to be the most wonderful marketplace in the universe. Many of the special materials needed for his demonic formations and sinister concoctions that only the most wicked alchemist could produce could be purchased only in the Omphalos and nowhere else on Elysium. As there were just too many materials needed for his pandemonium, Han Shuo had his children go on their own ways to purchase the materials. Han Shuo wasn't worried about their safety. He knew that the Omphalos might just be the safest place in the world. After Rose, Ramen, Zavik, and the 5 elite zombies went on to carry out their businesses, Han Shuo and Han Hao, the father and son, were left to themselves. "Father, I don't think that I should spend too much time with you. I'm a god hunter from the Death Dominion. Although the fringe dwellers don't care, the rest of the world does. Getting associated with me won't be good for father," said Han Hao as he looked at Han Shuo. Han Shuo knew that this could be an issue. He thought for a moment before he asked, "You can alter your looks, right?" Han Hao nodded and replied, "Of course. If I want to, I can even turn into another person. Then just be more cautious in the future and change your appearance frequently. That way we won't be associated. I trust that you know what to do." "Got it. I will try to avoid getting father into unnecessary trouble." Han Hao kept silent for a moment before he continued. "However, the best solution is still to avoid staying with father as much as possible. I have been counting the days, and my troops should arrive at the fringe soon. They will need their leader. I should stay away from father for at least a little while. After all, my troops can't alter their looks." Han Shuo knew that it was by letting Han Hao take on the world on his own that he could gain experience and strength. Besides, Han Shuo doubted that an average powerhouse in the fringe could harm Han Hao. Han Shuo therefore nodded and agreed to it, and reminded Han Hao to always watch out for danger. The father and son then talked about their future communication methods. Han Shuo informed Han Hao of the pandemonium's location before they said goodbye. Han Hao then left by himself, perhaps to gather up those new followers of his. After Han Hao left, Han Shuo placed most of his time and energy into acquiring all the most exotic materials he needed. Han Shuo would spare no crystal coins to make his pandemonium the most fortified bastion on Elysium. It must be said that the Omphalos was a wonderful place. Many of the unique materials he needed for his demonic formations could be found here. However, after the incident outside the Omphalos checkpoint, some of those sellers, or rather scammers, dared not to do business with Han Shuo, no matter how much he offered, for they feared that Han Shuo might lay his deadly, treacherous hands on them. In the land of chaos, information spread faster than contagion. It hardly took a blink of an eye before all the forces that dwelled in the fringe recognized Han Shuo. Wherever he went, people whispered to each other while pointing and peeking at him. There were some who would look at him with angry eyes, but no one dared make any provocation. After going around the Omphalos for a few days, Ramen, Zavik, Rose, and the 5 elite zombies had spent more than 5 million black crystal coins and filled up more than 10 space rings with the materials that Han Shuo had instructed them to acquire. Han Shuo was nearly out of black crystal coins, but luckily, Han Jin had made plenty of them from his Goldstone enterprise. They may not have gotten by otherwise. One day, Han Shuo felt a ping in his consciousness. He suddenly sensed that his demonic bloods were approaching the Omphalos. Han Shuo expanded his consciousness and gradually spread it outwards. Soon, he sensed the presence of Goron and the others. I enter the Omphalos and look for me. I Han Shuo could command his minions from hundreds of miles away via the demonic blood implanted in them. The gang headed by Goron entered the Omphalos one after another and assembled around Han Shuo. Within a month, all those fringe dwellers that hosted Han Shuo's demonic blood had returned to Han Shuo. However, unlike the last time, there weren't just 30-something experts. There were now more than 200 experts gathered around him. Some of those 30-something fringe dwellers who had survived the penta-elemental undead formation were leaders of their own factions. They had brought their followers to the Omphalos as Han Shuo had commanded. The impressive number of fringe dwellers gathered around Han Shuo had to pay a great amount of black crystal coins each day they spent in the Omphalos. But fortunately, they had deep pockets and the expenditure wasn't too much for them. However, the Omphalos guards had been keeping a close eye on them during their stay lest they cause trouble in the demilitarized zone. One day, Liulong came to Han Shuo and asked, "Brian, are you free to meet Lord Asura now?" "Of course, I've been waiting for him," replied Han Shuo cheerfully. He thought. Chapter 854, Show of Goodwill GDK 854. Show of Goodwill of the 5 sovereigns, Asura was relatively low profile and friendly. In their countless struggles for control over the Omphalos, Asura was usually on the defensive. He didn't fight unless he had to. Han Shuo was led to a relatively secluded, peaceful pavilion in the Omphalos. When he met Asura, it struck Han Shuo how ordinary he looked with his amiable smile on his face all the time. He looked like your typical middle-aged neighbor, not at all fearsome or forceful, as the rumors described. Although Asura was an overgod of earth energy, Han Shuo did not sense any particularly intense energy aura coming from him. In fact, Han Shuo did not get the impression that this guy was at all a mighty god. The aura he emanated was mild and calm. It felt as magnanimous as the ground he was stepping on instead of overwhelming and piercing. If it wasn't for the few late-stage high god experts standing behind him respectfully, Han Shuo might even have overlooked this stranger in the pavilion, for he seemed too ordinary. Han Shuo walked up to Asura alone. With a natural and relaxed smile, he said, "Hello, I'm Brian." An expert who could completely conceal his aura to the point that even Han Shuo could not notice it must have possessed extraordinary strength. Needless to say, Han Shuo was no ignoramus. He wouldn't have been disrespectful to Asura just because he seemed ordinary. Asura turned to look at Han Shuo, who was walking in. He laughed lightly and gestured at Han Shuo in a friendly manner, saying, Come, over here." "Haha, no need to be too polite. It's an honor to meet the famous Brian at last. Your reputation as a genius pharmacist in the death, darkness, and destruction dominions precedes you." Han Shuo knew that from the moment he informed Liu Long of his name, the information would have spread all over the fringe, though the network of stringers. And before long, they would figure out his identity and origins. Therefore, Han Shuo was not surprised that Asura knew about his identity as a pharmacist. He calmly replied, "You flatter me, Lord Asura. I may be well known in 3 dominions, but your lordship cannot be more famous in all 12 dominions." Asura put on a bitter smile after hearing Han Shuo's compliment. He replied, "More infamous than famous, no?" Han Shuo stared blankly for a bit before he laughed and said, "Aren't they pretty much the same?" "They are," Asura smiled and said. "However, we fringe dwellers will always be discriminated against by those in the 12 dominions. They may step into the fringe and even assimilate with the society as long as they have sufficient strength. We fringe dwellers, however, will never be able to blend into their society." "It's such a shame." Asura spoke the truth. Those who could not live in the 12 dominions could come to the fringe for shelter. However, the fringe dwellers would have to face countless hurdles to live in any city of the 12 dominions. Most of the cities would bar fringe dwellers from entering. In their eyes, all those who lived in the fringe were thugs, murderers, and god hunters. They did not want any fringe dwellers to step into their cities and disrupt their stability. It's the same living anywhere. But there wouldn't be a problem if a character of your level wishes to travel around the 12 dominions, would there? Asked Han Shuo smilingly. Asura shook his head and lightly sighed as though he was holding onto hidden sorrows. However, he did not explain it to Han Shuo. After taking a short pause, Asura looked at Han Shuo smilingly and asked, "You've been doing well in the Darkness Dominion's City of Shadows. Why would you come to the fringe?" "Well, nothing much. I just feel that a place filled with conflict would be better for cultivation." Han Shuo, naturally, would not tell Asura his real reason for coming to the fringe, which was to grasp it under his rule. Asura took a few intense looks at Han Shuo, as though he knew that Han Shuo did not speak his true purpose. However, Asura did not ask any more questions about it. He thought for a moment and said, "Well, now, let's talk business. I'm aware that you could refine some pretty miraculous medicines. There are battles constantly breaking out in the fringe, and there is great demand for your medicines. The Omphalos has its rules. If you wish to set up your pharmacy in the Omphalos and do business here, you will have to overcome a number of hurdles and meet a hefty few requirements. But I can help you skip through all that. All I ask in return is the preemptive right to purchase every batch of medicines that you produce." Han Shuo had stayed in the Omphalos for some time, and he knew the cost to set up a business in the Omphalos. On top of having to pay a large amount of black crystal coins as registration fees, they also needed the approval of at least 3 sovereigns. And if they were approved, the businesses would be taxed half of its income. The conditions were so prohibitive that Han Shuo could not imagine the effort it would take to set up a Celestial Pearl branch in the Omphalos. However, there was another type of shop in the Omphalos that wasn't required to pay any registration fees or taxes. This unique type of shop was called a sovereign's shop. As the name implies, they were assets of the sovereigns themselves. As administrators of the Omphalos, each sovereign possessed 10 sovereign shops. There may have been thousands upon thousands of big and small shops in the Omphalos, but there could only ever be 50 sovereign shops. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment after hearing Asura's proposal. He asked in an uncertain voice, "You mean?" Asura nodded and answered, "Yes, I will make one of my sovereign shops available for you. You should know the benefits of a sovereign shop. Their masters and workers have residential rights and do not need to pay any fees for staying in the Omphalos." Han Shuo did not immediately agree. He raised one brow, looked at Asura, and asked, "The only condition is the preemptive right to purchase the medicines I personally made." "Yes, it's that simple," affirmed Asura. Han Shuo smiled respectfully and replied, "The offer sounds too good to be true. I dare not accept it rashly. Lord Asura, let's not mince words. Why would you offer me such a great gift?" Asura kept silent for a moment before he suddenly chuckled and said, "To me, it's much more interesting to become friends with a character like you than to be enemies. You are not the kind of person who would bow to anyone. I'm not as naive as certain people who think it's possible to make you a servant. And in order not to make an enemy of you, I should express goodwill in advance. This would also make cooperation in the future a possibility. Haha, I have no intentions of malice. It's all right if you're not willing to take my sovereign shop. I won't force it on you. Why would I not take it? Han Shu smiled and replied, to refuse such a gift would be impolite. Thanks for the gift. Liu Long, you will be in charge of this matter, instructed Asura. Then he turned to Han Shu and smilingly said, You are a decent lad, but still, be cautious in the fringe. I hope that I will get a good return on investment on my sovereign shop. Han Shu nodded smilingly but said nothing. He knew that Asura did that so that they wouldn't be enemies for a while. Given how Han Shu had been acting, it was only a matter of time before conflicts arose between Han Shu and the four sovereigns. Asura, meanwhile, would be able to avoid the conflicts. He could even use them to gauge Han Shu's actual strength. If Han Shu could diminish the strengths of the other four sovereigns, that would be great news to Asura, who would remain unharmed. Even if it emerged that Han Shu was actually weak enough to be killed by the other four sovereigns, Asura could simply retake the sovereign shop he gifted to Han Shu. No matter the outcome, Asura would lose nothing. There could not be a better investment for Asura to make. Asura and Han Shu chatted for a while. Asura gave relevant instructions to his followers before he nodded at Han Shu smilingly and left. After Asura left, Liu Long came forward to congratulate Han Shu for receiving a sovereign shop tens of thousands of square meters in size. He would take care of the chores of setting up the Celestial Pharmacy branch on Han Shu's behalf. The previous tenant of the shop was evicted in one day. Every inch of soil in the Omphalos was worth a shit ton of crystal coins. There were just 50 sovereign shops in the entire city, and Han Shu was gifted one soon after arriving in the fringe. Many envied the treatment he received, but no one dared cause him trouble. Han Shu had thought about placing the headquarters of the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in the Omphalos before coming to the fringe. The most lunatic and top-notch pharmacists were all in the fringe. In addition, poisons, crystal cores, and ingredients banned in the 12 dominions were sold here in abundance. The fringe was a paradise for Han Shu, who cultivated in the sinister demonic arts. Han Shu had no plans of starting business soon. After securing the shop, Han Shu continued to instruct his servants and the 5 elite zombies to purchase the materials needed for reconstructing the pandemonium. They spent nearly 3 months and an untold fortune to purchase the materials. Han Jin had also dug out some more materials from the mountains and valleys nearby. Finally, the party started returning to the pandemonium. Han Shu reactivated the Yin Gathering formation, and the elemental energies started assembling in the valley. Goron and the others were amazed by the intensity of elemental energies. After creating rooms for his followers in the pandemonium and settling them down, Han Shu and the 5 elite zombies started building their future home. Earth Elite Zombie hid deep underground. He spent a year excavating an enormous underground palace. Metal Elite Zombie carved out stone chambers in the mountains surrounding the valley. The 5 elite zombies had also erected numerous sturdy structures in the valley. For 2 years, Han Shu and the 5 elite zombies worked on the pandemonium without rest before they finally completed the mega construction. The valley had been turned into a treacherous place where every step could mean certain death. The Yin Gathering formation at the center had become surrounded by several dozen big and small demonic formations. Colorful miasmic gas shrouded the valley, limiting visibility. During those 2 years, some fringe dwellers had wandered there or tried to explore the area, but all of them would miraculously disappear without a trace. Over time, nobody dared step into the region. With everything in place, Han Shu gathered all his men, and to give the first of the many commands he would give in his conquest for the fringe. Chapter 855, Expansion GDK 855. Expansion: the elemental energies in the pandemonium intensified after the formations were complete. All those who lived in the valley could sense the benefits the formations brought. At the center of the pandemonium was an enormous yin-gathering formation, and surrounding it was a variety of demonic formations. Those who did not know the intricacies of demonic formations would be greeted with catastrophic attacks as soon as they stepped into one. Even a high god would easily perish. Other than the buildings located near the center, the underground palace dug by Earth Elite Zombie was also one of extreme grandiosity. Most of those who lived in the underground palace were those closest to Han Shu. For example, the 5 elite zombies and rows. Meanwhile, Han Shu's demon guards went on to live in those mountain chambers carved by metal elite zombie. Those buildings in the center of the valley were prepared for members of the House of Han in the City of Shadows. During those 2 years, Han Shu and the 5 elite zombies had turned the pandemonium into an impregnable fortress. It was filled with such great dangers that even Liu Long and his men dared not wander around the valley. Han Shuo's mind entered a state of total calmness when he placed all his attention on constructing the demonic formation. Unwittingly, his demonic yuan reserves had greatly increased. Han Shuo had a vague feeling that he was on the very brink of a breakthrough, as though he was just one step away from the next realm. His 2 avatars had also unexpectedly advanced to the early stage High God realm during that time. One of those days that Han Shu was totally absorbed in working on the demonic formations, his avatars had a sudden enlightenment and gained a deeper level of insight into the energies of death and destruction. Instantly, the divine energies of death and destruction in his body started transforming. In the span of just 3 days, Han Shu's avatars had gone from barely comprehending the nature of the energies deeper to advancing to high godhood. And when the avatars fused their domains of divinity, the extremely intense element of death swarmed towards Han Shu and started to swirl into a hurricane that would engulf anything and everything in its path. Han Shu was not keen on exploring his novel domain of divinity inside the pandemonium yet, for he did not want to risk damaging the incomplete formations. Instead, he continued to direct all his effort at constructing the pandemonium. Then, one day, the mega construction was finally done. His grand vision of the pandemonium had been actualized. Han Shuo gathered up the 5 elite zombies, Rose, Ramen, Zavik, Goron, and all the demon guards, and started explaining the correct method to enter and exit the pandemonium. He also warned them against wandering around the valley, lest they run into the deadly traps. The 200-something demon guards led by Goron had come to recognize the mysteriousness and treacherousness of the pandemonium. A few of them had accidentally stepped into a vicious demonic formation and nearly lost their lives there. They did not need Han Shu's reminder to always sit tight in their chambers. The pandemonium has been completed. From today onwards, start expanding our territory around the valley. Conquer all the regions and forces, big and small. If they are not willing to submit, kill them. After having been quiet for 2 years, Han Shu was ready to raise some hell. He wanted to mow down the many forces located around the pandemonium. The pandemonium was located in a rather remote part of the land of chaos. Those who occupied the lands around the pandemonium were scattered forces of the fringe, and none were followers of the 5 sovereigns. To Han Shuo, they were tiny ants that were of no threat to him. The several dozen big and small demonic formations in the pandemonium were arranged in a unique, complicated pattern that allowed them to work together to form the Demannihilation Supercluster formation. When Han Shu was inside the pandemonium, he could significantly amplify his strength using the cluster of demonic formations. Therefore, Han Shu was confident that even if the 5 sovereigns joined hands in attacking him at the pandemonium, he could fight them off. With such a defensible haven, there was no way that Han Shu would not start his conquest. His first step was to conquer the scattered forces around the pandemonium. He could then consider further expanding his territory after those around him had been captured. "Don't worry, master, I will bring them to their knees," said Ramen with a mischievous smirk. He had discovered a spike in the number of scouts lurking nearby the pandemonium in recent times. Those scattered forces nearby were worried about the unexplained changes in pandemonium. Perhaps even if Han Shu remained unaggressive, it would only be a matter of time before they came knocking on Han Shu's door. "Good. Show no mercy to those who do not obey," commanded Han Shu. The fringe was a place where the strong were honored. It was only by shedding the blood of their enemies that they could gain the respect of others. Following Han Shu's instructions, Ramen, Zavik, and Goron led the army of demon guards, 200 strong, away from the pandemonium and started their conquest. Han Shuo, meanwhile, would stay in the pandemonium. The first phase of the conquest should be easy enough that he wouldn't need to fight on the front line himself. He started meditating, cultivating, and preparing for the impending demonic calamity. Han Shuo wished to advance to the next realm as to better face the threat of the five sovereigns. One day, while Han Shuo was meditating in the underground palace of the Pandemonium, Rose went to him and reported, "Master, I have received news from Liulong that Han Hao has annihilated yet another faction. The faction was led by a cultivator of the energy of light who possessed late-stage high god strength. Fantastic! He has managed to make a breakthrough yet again?" Han Shuo was elated by the news. 2 years ago, he was killing mostly mid-stage high gods, but things have now changed. Haha, I bet he's giving a lot of those fringe dwellers a damn fine headache. Han Hao had never visited the Pandemonium once during those 2 years. Ever since his followers in the Death Dominion had come to the fringe, Han Hao started striking fear in the hearts of the fringe dwellers. In the short time of just 2 years, a dozen or more big and small forces had perished at his hands. Han Hao's reputation had also been soaring, and he became known as one of the most feared forces in the fringe. Many of the scattered god hunters in the fringe submitted to his rule. Both his strength and the power he commanded had been rapidly growing. Ever since Han Shuo established good relations with Liulong's master, Liulong never neglected to deliver news of major events in the fringe, giving Han Shuo a good grasp of what had been happening around there. "Master, it is said that the force annihilated by Han Hao was a close follower of Sala's." Rose wore a grave expression and seemed concerned as she said, "He had never previously attacked any followers of the five sovereigns. Why would he be so rash this time? The five sovereigns are unlike any other forces. Will he be all right?" Han Shu also started to feel worried after hearing those words. Almost no one would challenge the authority of the five sovereigns in the fringe. Han Hao had killed a follower of Sovereign Sala's and even left it to be exposed. This could potentially invite the retribution from the sovereign. No matter how greatly Han Hao's strength had been improving, he would still be no match against any of the sovereigns. Therefore, Han Shu couldn't help but feel worried. "Where was Han Hao last seen?" asked Han Shu solemnly after muttering to himself for a moment. "Venomfang Mountain," answered Rose. "I'll be away from the valley for a while. You and my 5 kids will look after the Pandemonium. And don't worry about getting attacked. My kids know how to operate the formations. Even if the 5 sovereigns come here themselves, they cannot easily break through our defenses," instructed Han Shuo. He then went to the 5 elite zombies, gave some instructions, and left the Pandemonium alone. "Chief, what should we do? That guy turned out to be a follower of Sala's. Sala's will surely seek retribution by annihilating us." Arthurs, an early-stage high god of destruction, said gravely to the indifferent Han Hao who sat cross-legged on a boulder. There were nearly 500 god hunters gathered before Han Hao. The gang of ferocious gods had obliterated countless forces in the fringe. All of them wore respectful attitudes as they looked upon Han Hao for guidance. Among them were those teenagers who had each paid 500,000 black crystal coins to Han Hao in the Omphalos. "It's no bother. We just need to stay hidden for a while," replied Han Hao. It was no stretch to assume that even if a person stuck a knife in his chest, Han Hao wouldn't make the slightest reaction. His followers found that demeanor of his admirable. "But Chief, we are talking about Sala's," Arthur stressed. "Sala's is extremely influential in the fringe and commands an extensive network of scouts. Our numbers are great. It doesn't seem feasible to hide all of us. Everyone will scatter around the fringe. Do not gather without my orders. If Sala's were to strike, he would come after me. He won't take the time to hunt you down one by one if you are dispersed. And remember this, do not ever step into the Omphalos," commanded Han Hao after thinking for a moment. "Why? Isn't Omphalos the safest place?" asked Arthurs after staring blankly for a bit. "It's tantamount to throwing your life away. If any of Sala's followers discover you in the Omphalos, they can make up an excuse to throw you out. By then, you will be dead without a doubt."